Speakers should mute themselves now so we don't have any background noises. And our speaker tonight is Scott. Welcome, Scott. And after 15 minutes, our timer, who is Dave S., he's going to give you a buzzer warning, 5 minutes before the 20-minute time limit. And make sure you're unmuted, and you can go ahead and start your share now. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everybody. My name is Scott, and I am a compulsive overeater. You can hear me okay? Perfect. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. This is my first time at this meeting. I was asked to speak at this meeting less than a week ago. I'm glad it worked out. I'm actually from Northern California. Don't worry, I'm not a lunatic. I have been in the OA fellowship for almost 20 years. I came in at age 28. I'm now 48. On March 2nd, 2021, that'll be my 20 years in the OA fellowship. I have lost and kept off 100 plus pounds for the better part of the last 8 to 9 years. And I have had, my waist size has decreased by about 10 sizes. In addition to all of that, I have counted 18 medical, psychiatric, neurological, and cognitive health conditions completely healed without doctors, without nurses, without therapists, without surgeons, without pharmacists, without personal trainers, without nutritionists, without light treatment, without shock treatment, without religions, without hocus pocus, without gurus, without magic, without miracles, without exercise, and without medication. 18 medical, psychiatric, neurological, and cognitive health conditions completely healed just by overhauling what goes into my mouth versus what does not go into my mouth. And in addition to that, I recently celebrated 6 years of no credit card debt. Now, the reason why I mentioned those last two facts in an OA meeting, when I was a newcomer or an otherwise still suffering compulsive overeater, I needed to hear people share about recovering from the consequences beyond weight, of course. That's the obvious consequence of compulsive overeating. But I needed to hear about some of the other common consequences of compulsively overeating. Also, as a newcomer or an otherwise still suffering compulsive overeater, I needed to hear about people getting their financial situation straight. There's a tie-in between my career as a compulsive overeater and going into debt. The fact of the matter is, because of all the man-made junk food and man-made junk beverages I put into my body over, a few decades, there was a 10-year stretch there where I was legally disabled. I'm not legally disabled anymore, but there was a decade there where I was. And I was getting all kind of government benefits and government freebies. And I needed to hear people get over that, get to the other side of that. So anyway, if you find yourself in either of those situations with the health or even the financial stuff, I'm only one person in OA, but let me tell you, there is hope for that in the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous. So I hope that's helpful. So when I think of, and just a few statistics, right? So I mentioned the weight loss number. Well, I'll come to that later, perhaps. When I think of my life, I think of a number line between negative 36 and positive 36. On the left side of this number line is, the negative numbers. This is representative of what I was like. And the number in the middle, the 0, is representative of what happened. And the positive numbers on the right side of the number line is representative of what I'm like now. And the reason why I use 1 through 36 on both sides of the number line is because In OA, we have 12 steps, we have 12 traditions, and we have 12 concepts. The steps are about me. The traditions are about we. Just switch that M around and make it into a W, a lowercase w. And the concepts are about we with a capital W. So, you know, before my first meeting of Overeaters Anonymous, I lived a pretty awful, horrible life. I mean, a lot of suicidal depression, a lot of crippling anxiety. And, you know, when I was 25 years old, I had made the decision to eat myself to death. And that was 3 years before my first OA meeting, right? So, you know, before my first OA meeting, there was a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, and a lot of anxiety, right? Resentment is about my fear of the past. Anger is about my fear of the present. Anxiety is about my fear of the future. And to kind of give you an idea of what my Bizarro World 12 steps may look and sound like, I'll give you an example. So step -1, I don't have a problem with food. I just like to eat. In fact, in my opinion, food isn't the problem, it's the solution. That would be step -1. Step -2, came to believe a power greater than myself, hated my guts. Step -3, made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God, because if I didn't, he would punish my family and me. Steps -4 and -5, I don't have any secrets. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you a single thing. Mind your own business. Steps -6 and -7. The solution to all the world's problems is revenge. And if I were you, I would grow a set of eyes behind your head. Steps -8 and -9. I don't owe you an apology. You all owe me an apology. You're the reason why I'm screwed up in the head right now. And then steps -10, -11, and -12. This guy doesn't need maintenance. He did it right the first time. So you may hear and sense a lot of pain in that way of living. Well, I indeed was in a great amount of pain. So continuing on with what I was like, and this will give you an idea of how why I lived those bizarro, the -12 steps. I was 4 years old when I misused food for the first time. I was 4 years old when I misused food for the second time. I was 4 years old when I first stole money from my mom's purse to buy candy bars. I was 4 years old when my father became my first binge buddy. And I was 4 years old when I learned the very hard way that my dad has a problem with rage. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my dad began taking me to church. And my experience with that was pretty negative. I learned how to fear God. Instead of loving and trusting a higher power, I learned to fear my higher power at the time. And, my concern was that if I didn't pray to this higher power, all the time, that bad things would happen to myself and or my family. When I was 11 years old, I met binge buddy number 2. Now, unfortunately, binge buddy number 2 loved beating the hell out of me, physically, emotionally, verbally, and even sometimes financially. And, that was a secret I kept to myself, until about my mid-20s. I finally kind of came out about all the physical abuse and some of the verbal abuse that I experienced at that time for about 3.5 years approximately. When I was 11 years old, I got my first ever, when I was 13 years old, I got my first ever job. I delivered newspapers 7 days a week for the San Francisco Examiner, which used to be our afternoon newspaper. And I made $1 a day on average, $30 a month. For the first time in my life, I had money, and I'd gotten some allowance here and there, but for the first time in my life, I had my own money, and I can go to get myself soda anytime I wanted to, or I could, go to a fast food place and get myself burgers anytime I wanted to. and things like that. So at a very young age, I learned some really bad habits. I learned how to be dishonest. I learned how to run away from life. I learned how to have very poor boundaries. I learned how to check out. You know, for a long time, my life consisted of food, TV, and suicidal ideations. And I also slept a lot. You know, there's a period in my life in my 20s where I slept about 20 hours per day. No kidding. So that's a little bit of what I was like. What happened was in early 2001, in February of 2001, I found myself in group therapy. So I was so sick at the time, I had to temporarily live in a halfway house. And one of the agreements for living there was I had to do outside therapy for 12 hours per week in a group setting. So I found myself in this intensive outpatient program, and there was a woman there who was there for the same reasons as me, and I developed a crush on her. And, you know, through a mutual attendee of this program, she and I became friends. One day, she randomly invited me to an OA meeting, and I said yes to her invite. But I didn't say yes to her invite because I was eating out of my garbage can nightly. I didn't say yes to her invite because I was morbidly obese. I said yes to her invite because I just wanted to hang out with her. So we planned for this Friday evening meeting in San Francisco, a meeting that's no longer taking place. Now, before we can get to that meeting together, she and I have a falling out, and we mutually agreed not a good idea to go to this meeting together. But that Friday night rolled around, and as usual, I had nothing better to do, and something in me said, just check it out, it can't hurt. So I checked it out, and almost 20 years later, it hasn't hurt. So that's what happened. What I'm like now is a lot different than what I was like. You know, it was in OA recovery where I went on my first date, kissed a woman for the first time, you know, lost my virginity, was in a romantic relationship for the first time, went through my first breakup. It was in OA recovery where I got my first ever driver's license, my first 3 vehicles, all of my vehicles have come in recovery. It was in OA recovery where I moved out of my parents' apartment finally, regularly. I haven't moved back, haven't needed to move back, not even close. It was in OA recovery where I got 3 different college degrees. It was in OA recovery where I got my first 2 big boy jobs, grown-up jobs, 40-hour-a-week jobs where I have the weekends off. And, you know, it was in OA recovery where I was able to kind of, you know, deal with my financial issues of the past. And, you know, I'm doing really well financially now. So I have a lot of gifts that I've gotten from this program, and I will forever be grateful for that. And, you know, there are other goals I have in life too. And, you know, I've gotten really good, thanks to OA recovery, I've gotten really good at creating my own luck. I've gotten really good at showing up for life, even when I've screwed up. You know, one of the greatest gifts I got from OA is that when I've messed up, I have no problem looking you in the eye and saying, that was on me, I messed up. And on the flip side of that, if you've messed up, I have no problem looking you in the eye and saying, you know what, you screwed up, right? The former is about having some humility. The latter is about having healthy boundaries for the first time in my life, right? So that's a little bit of what I was like. You know, my current home meeting is studying step 2 this month. And so it's kind of on my mind. So if you don't mind, I want to spend my last 5 minutes or so sharing my experience, strength, and hope with step 2. So when I walked through my first meeting of Overeaters Anonymous at age 28, my starting point, my point A of this journey, you know, I was this 28-year-old virgin who still lived at home with his parents, who didn't have a driver's license, who was on 8 different medications for a number of health conditions. And what step 2 asked me to do is kind of imagine a life where, I'm still that same person, but I kind of have the opposite of all those problems. For example, if I'm a 315-pound individual when I walk into OA, which I was, then step 2, God is representative of me being in a more normal, healthy body weight.
You've got 5 minutes, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When I walk into my first meeting of Overeaters Anonymous, and if I'm on 8 different medications, which I was, step 2, God is representative of me being on no medications or some number, fewer than 8, because the goal is progress. And, if I'm someone who walks into my first meeting of OA and I have issues with people pleasing, well, then step 2, God is representative of me being, me no longer being a people pleaser, and so on, right? And that's kind of what step 2 does. Is it asks me to kind of really answer the following question: who am I without the disease of compulsive overeating? Like, if you could somehow erase all that, who would I become? Well, in my case, I become a very productive member of society. And unfortunately, things happened later in my life than I wanted to, but I couldn't control, I guess that, I had to struggle through the disease for a long time to really get to the other side and just kind of figure things out. Now, of course, as a newcomer, my main focus was on the food and some of the consequences. As a newcomer, my goal was to lose a lot of weight. The outcome that I preferred was to be able to wear normal size clothing. What it was that I desired was to no longer be a slave to the food man. And this is how I define God, my higher power today. G-O-D, goals, outcomes, desires. What are my goals in life? What are my preferred outcomes? What is it in this world that I desire? And, once I put down the fork, life started to happen. I have a sponsee who recently completed step 2, and, he was saying to me, Scott, the way I do the God thing is God leads and I follow. And, that is not my experience. In fact, it's the other way around for me. It's like I put the fork down, I lead, and then God all of a sudden shows up. And there's a reason why step 1 is in the step 1 position and step 2 is in the step 2 position. My experience is that I could not find a useful higher power until I put the fork down first. Because here's the thing. I've given up a lot of things. I've given up refined white table sugar. I've given up wheat products because I'm physically addicted to white flour. I've given up corn products. I've given up rice and most potato products. I've given up caffeine. I've given up dairy. I've given up meat. I've given up artificially sweetened foods and beverages. And the level of clarity I have today has never been greater. And, I now refer to all of that stuff that shows up in my step 1 work, my food history, as God blockers. And the reason why I call them God blockers is because that's exactly what they do. They block me from God. They block me from achieving my goals, the outcomes that I want, and my desires. And if you prefer, replace the D with dreams or destiny, right? It's like standing at the beach and looking out, and all you see is dark clouds and fog. That's what the man-made chemicals did to my head. And now that I'm off the stuff, clear, nothing but clarity, right? And because I have this clarity, life is slowed down now, and I can do the right thing more times than not. I could be a better driver in traffic, a more responsible employee. I can have patience. I could be in really healthy romantic relationships, and I can now have healthy boundaries. So I think I'm done there. I hope that was a helpful share. I appreciate the invite. And I really look forward to hearing what you have for me tonight, or for yourself. Thanks.
Perfect timing, brother. It was